Okay, Intro 0.0, part 6. This should be our last segment. Our heading here is context. Now, this piece was worn as a pendant. It was not something that was placed in a museum. This has a lot of power to it. It's from Benin. And one of the things about Benin is it's part of the slave trade, um, but it interacted with Europeans. So these guys, these strange-looking little men up here, those are Portuguese men with their funny little hats. So this is a pendant worn by a ruler, we know that, and because he had associations with these Portuguese, that makes him more powerful. And it's carved out of ivory, which is reserved. The carving of ivory was reserved for the ruler. So this is a powerful piece. Read up on this a little bit more about the context. Um, but just so you know, like, not everything is placed in a museum. We kind of want to go back to that concept. Okay, with David Hockney's piece here, we get into formal analysis, and I don't know why it's like a little mini subheading here, but it's very important. We really want to think about how we talk about art and how we write about art, and you are going to really be required in this course to understand these terms. And there's a bunch of them here, which is not complete, but on these pages 44 and 45, we have texture, contrast, middle ground, atmospheric perspective, space value, organic, two-dimensional. Then on 45, emphasis, foreground, background, scale, focal point, and implied line. All right, so that would take me quite a bit of time to go through all of that, but I want you to also think about using the back of your book. There's a glossary back there, and use the index to look up these terms in other places in the book, okay? So make sure you're really well versed on everything here, and you'll go back to this segment of the book. I'm going to ask you to describe the difference between abstract and representational, and I'm going to also ask you to talk about the elements and principles repeatedly. All right, so we have this beautiful piece, and Hockney lived in LA. He's a British artist. He is in his 80s now. Really interesting guy, super famous. He's made a ton of artwork. You want to look him up. He's now doing some more traditional things. He also has a photography series, but this is one of his most famous works. And it's a pool with two figures, portrait of an artist. And this is really just a beautiful, color-rich painting. And when we were looking previously, like when we looked at that infinity piece, what was happening at the time, just previous to this, was abstract, very, very highly abstracted work. And this has got some abstraction. There's a little bit of abstraction, and some abstraction in the pool, perhaps. That it is. This is abstracted to a smaller degree. This is highly representational for the most part. So it's kind of like you want to think of it as a sort of a spectrum, you know, or a dividing line or a circle, or however you want to visualize abstract and representational and non-objective. But this is fairly representational with a degree of abstraction, put it that way. This has, for starters, this beautiful delineation of textures and colors. I'm actually going to say color is really the most powerful thing here, and we don't talk about it in the art terms here, but I think the colors really grab me the most. These amazing blues, you really get a sense of the pool and the wateriness, and you get a sense of the hillsides and his jacket, of course. But if you look here, this is atmospheric perspective, and the color in part has to do with atmospheric perspective. These hills are all in real life, you know, as we would be looking at them, they're the same color. But as things recede, they get more bluish and they get foggier. Does that make sense? Now, this is true of really highly representational, super realistic painting as well. And then artists will even use this for other types of ways to demonstrate space. So there's a depth of space here. We're going off way into the distance. So that is giving us a sense of oh, I don't know, infinite space. But these hills here are the same, right? They just look different because they are further away. And the device that we know of is atmospheric perspective. This gets foggier and bluer as it goes away. Does that make sense? More detail and clearer vision, less blue filter, then it looks closer. And that is really how we see things in the world. There is kind of a haziness to things. You'll notice this more now that I've said this if you haven't noticed it already. Okay, so another thing is line. This line here is pointing toward our figure. That line also is pointing us out into the space. There's some beautiful implied lines here. There's reflection of water. I think he does a beautiful job of that. We have our two figures, and we get a sense of separateness. When someone's underwater, we know you can't talk to them, right? And they're there, but they're not there. So part of the thing here with our formal analysis is the content, and that's an important word. And part of the content and the emotion here, if you look in the end of page 45, you'll read about how this is the end of a relationship for Hockney. This is his ex-boyfriend here. So it's interesting how there's this sense of separateness. He's painting another person, not himself, but a sense of separation between the two figures. There's a lot more going on here. I want you to really focus on all these different terms here. Organic versus geometric. Obviously, this is a geometric line, sharp and right-angled. Organic, that would be a really great example, these fluffy sort of rounded shapes here. That is an organic line right there. All kinds of stuff going on here, but look carefully at our vocabulary and we will revisit this vocabulary in another chapter.